morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. We are at my home again today and tomorrow, studio work being done, so we're letting them do that, and I am here today talking Georgia football with you. Coming up in a moment, a couple of very interesting things. First of all, something that all Georgia fans should be grateful for, and this is a time of year for gratitude, so perfect topic for us here today. Also, there's big news around Dog Nation we really haven't talked about yet. We'll do that today, make sure we do that. And an example of the Georgia culture and how great former players are still impacting the current Georgia players. You'll like that too. That's coming up. Plus, speaking of great former Georgia players, one of those will join us on today's show as well. Terrence Edwards stops by. We're getting ready for a very interesting weekend in the SEC. Georgia hoping for a tune-up on Senior Day against Charlotte. Other teams trying to avoid upset. We'll cover all of that with you here today. And we are glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at georgiadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
You know, next week is Thanksgiving, so we try to live with an attitude of gratitude all the time, but it's especially poignant this time of year to think about things you might be thankful for. And I would say that for Georgia fans today, there is at least one big thing that you ought to be quite grateful for. That's the fact that in the midst of some incredible chaos for the SEC, which is frankly pretty good entertainment for those of us who are following it, for the most part, Georgia is not really a participant in this at all. Let me give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So if you remove Georgia from the equation, that leaves 15 teams in the SEC. Did you know that of the 15 non-SEC teams other than Georgia in the league right now, a full 20% of those teams are completely embroiled in what is Lane Kiffin going to do next? And let me tell you something you already know. If a very important question to you happens to be, what is Lane Kiffin going to do next? Well, you know at that point you are already in trouble. But that's what Ole Miss and LSU and Florida are having to do right now. Supposedly there's an ultimatum to Lane Kiffin from Ole Miss about, are you coaching our team or not? Kiffin says that doesn't exist, and he said yesterday that of course he plans on coaching the Egg Bowl. I don't know if it's quite so simple as that, because if he's not going to be at Ole Miss next year, he's almost certainly going to be at either LSU or Florida, and both those programs right now would seem to be standing around waiting with bated breath about Kiffin, whether or not he'll take their job or if he's going to stay at Ole Miss or when this announcement might come down. That is 3 different SEC teams wrapped up in all of that. But then beyond that, you've got this. Auburn and Arkansas also have coaching openings right now. You've had Steve Sarkisian, the Texas coach this week, have to come out and say, hey, I've got no plans of being anywhere next year. All those rumors you've heard about me, rumors that we've covered on this show, all those rumors you've heard about me, they're not true at all. I'm not going anywhere. I'm still going to be the Texas coach next year. In addition to that, you've got Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri in the midst of a good season. If Kiffin does not take either the Florida job or the LSU job, there's some reason to believe that Eli Drinkwitz could be a legitimate candidate for one of those jobs. And so he may be leaving Missouri. To go along with that, on the other end of the happiness spectrum, you've got teams like Texas A&M and Oklahoma trying to make the college football playoff. You can literally look at almost every spot in the SEC and say they're either hoping to make the playoff or they're maybe going to fire their coach or maybe going to have their coach leave. And that's before you even get into, as a narrow favorite on Saturday, what happens if Tennessee loses to Florida? What are the Tennessee fan viewpoint going to be of Josh Heupel at that point? Or with Alabama trying to battle Auburn in the Iron Bowl coming up next Saturday, what happens if Kalen DeBoer misses the playoff, an expanded playoff, which is theoretically supposed to be easier to make, for a second straight year after replacing Nick Saban? What happens at Alabama? There is chaos, in other words, at every spot in the SEC, or the potential for chaos, if not downright drama, downright chaos. And boy, I tell you, it certainly seems like Georgia is just tiptoeing through the tulips right now. And we mentioned this briefly yesterday, just moving around this, navigating all of this very easily at the moment. And if you're a Georgia fan, you shouldn't miss that. Now, we also know this, and Kirby Smart has said this, that for Georgia, you can't get too big for your britches. You can't get, too full of yourself, that humility is always just 1 week away. And obviously Georgia next week is going to play a very important game against Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech's got that game circled. And of course, last year, Georgia had a very quick exit from the college football playoff. It does not want that again this year. Of course, all that's true. And, there's still reason to believe that things may get hard for Georgia before the year is done. But right now, Georgia is just in a much better situation than almost anybody else in the SEC is. And we're not the only one who's noticing this. I saw where Peter Burns from the SEC Network also made mention of this too on social media. On his X platform account yesterday, he talked about with everything going on in the SEC, and I'll read this to you. He says, meanwhile, Georgia fans are seeing their program rounding into shape for a playoff run with a Heisman-type quarterback, knowing their head coach isn't going anywhere ever. And boy, you love that. You love to think about that. And it's kind of nice that someone like Peter Burns takes time to notice that, especially after last week. Peter Burns wasn't exactly in our good graces for all the stuff that he said about Texas. Now it would seem to be that Burns is giving Georgia the credit it deserves. So we enjoy that. And we enjoyed that tweet because, yes, for us in this time of gratitude, we do have a lot to be thankful for. There is no coaching drama at Georgia. Georgia right now, we don't think is trying to grasp and hold on to its faint playoff hopes. We think that Georgia has either already clinched a playoff spot or overwhelmingly likely to be in the upcoming postseason, and you feel really good about that. And Georgia in this month of November, as you head towards the postseason, as Burns also rightly points out, is seemingly playing its best football of the year on both sides of the ball. And how could you not think that after a 35-10 domination of Texas here this past week? All of this is so true that when Kirby Smart on the weekly SEC coaches teleconference was asked about how about the coaches changing jobs and who might be looking to go here and who might be looking to go there, Kirby Smart, and we certainly take him at his word when he says this, says he doesn't have time to pay attention to any of this. If anything, he just laughs the whole thing off. This is sarcastic Kirby at his best. This is from yesterday.
You're asking me to comment on something that I wouldn't be the expert of. I don't want to be the expert of, and I don't have room in my head to consume that information and process it. I mean, to each his own is all I can tell you.
And I think I speak on behalf of every single Georgia fan when I say, boy, I'm glad Kirby Smart's not the expert on that. And as Peter Burns said, I'm glad there's no time in the foreseeable future where Kirby Smart will be the expert on that. Kirby's not going anywhere. He seems to love Georgia. Georgia certainly seems to love him. And all is right around DawgNation right now. So with that said, I want to shift to this here today. You know, in the commentary we just had from Peter Burns, he talked about Georgia playing its best football, moving towards a potential playoff spot, seemingly almost having that locked away. If you ask yourself, why is it and how is it that Georgia's got to that point? One of the things that we think we see is that some guys who began the season for Georgia inexperienced, guys who began the season for Georgia with us just not exactly quite so sure how good they really were, how good they really were going to be. We have seen reason to believe that those players are rounding into form, and they're certainly showing improvement as you get into the regular season's most crucial month of November, and as you head towards the eventual postseason for Georgia, whatever that looks like, the SEC championship, college football playoff, and whatever else along the way here. We talked to Davin Bellamy some about this yesterday. Guys like Quintavious Johnson, guys like Gabe Harris just seem to be improving. The Georgia defense seems to be getting better because of that. And another name I think it's worth mentioning here is cornerback Demello Jones. Jones didn't play much in his freshman season at Georgia, and he's battled injury some this year. But shaking off that injury, Demello Jones seemingly gave Georgia a lot against Texas on Saturday, not just in pass coverage, but also the physicality too. Kirby Smart talked about a lot, and we've played these clips for you, after beating Texas, tracing it back to Georgia's willingness to hit people as to why it was that Georgia was able to win that game. Well, one of the things that we know is for Georgia, that's not just lines of scrimmage that are providing the physical play and putting the big hits on guys, big blocks, big tackles. It's also happening at the cornerback spot, too. Demello Jones embodies the physicality that Georgia wants to be all about. And on Monday, when Kirby Smart met with the media, he talked about that element of Demello's game and exactly how it is that has come to full fruition as much as it has for Georgia this season. Good stuff from Kirby going back to Monday on his second-year cornerback, Demello Jones.
Well, it creates value for him. It creates value for our team. We have what we want to be a tough physical team, and hard to be that if you don't have players that are willing to stick their face in there, tackle. He was that way in high school. He was that way in basketball. He's been that way competitively all his life. He's done it. So it doesn't surprise me that he's that way. He buys into that culture of toughness and showed it the other night.
As you hear Kirby Smart say that, there's also, I think, a really cool thing that we get a chance to experience here in the 10th year of Kirby Smart at Georgia. That means that Kirby Smart has cycled through several eras of players. Several senior classes have moved their way through, or guys that have just moved on to the NFL. In fact, we'll get a chance to celebrate some of those guys on Saturday for this year's Senior Day, and no doubt on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. But as you've seen these great eras of Georgia football players move through here, guys that have contributed to national championships for Georgia, guys who've gone on to be very high NFL draft picks, you see another generation of Georgia players who looks to embody what former great players in the Smart era have been able to do. And we just have a lot more of that now because Kirby Smart's been here for a while. In the early days of Kirby Smart, the Georgia players who were aspiring to greatness, when they thought about their, time previous to them at Georgia, they were thinking about guys that were coached by Mark Richt, and there were many obviously good ones who came up in the Richt era. But now Kirby's been here long enough that even though it seems like time has gone by so fast, that someone like Demello Jones can say, oh, I want to be just like so-and-so. In fact, we got a chance to hear from Demello Jones this week, and he did very much just that. When he was young and up and coming and looking to play at Georgia, he had a lot of respect for what Kamari Lassiter was doing at UGA and had a chance to even briefly learn from Kamari Lassiter. Well, now Kamari's gone on to be a terrific player for the Houston Texans, a very high draft pick for that organization after helping Georgia do some great things while he was here. And this week, Demello Jones says when he thinks about the kind of player he wants to be, he thinks about Kamari Lassiter. And Demello said that Kamari Lassiter has even helped him be the kind of player that he aspires to be. This is really good stuff earlier this week from Demello Jones on the impact that Kamari Lassiter had on him, both how he played the game and also a little bit of what Kamari Lassiter has even said to Demello Jones about all of that. I really like this. This is from earlier this week.
I still say it's probably Kamari. See what the things he did here and the success that he had and is still having at the next level. So I pride myself a lot in what he do.
Kind of follow up on that a little bit. Have you ever had any kind of conversations with Kamari? What kind of advice maybe has he given you?
To say keep working, young boy.
Yeah.
But just it coming from him, it means a lot to me. Yeah. That he just even cares to take time out of his day to even say anything to me and just giving me the more confidence and just been helping me build. I want to thank him for that.
It has been said before that one of the most important things about becoming an adult is learning the value of compound interest, that when you invest money, time over time, it has a tendency to grow for you far more than almost anybody else can understand. And, oftentimes it seems like as you get a little older, you have a better understanding of that than you do when you're young, when it would actually benefit you the most. Investing money when you're very young turns into a much larger sum over time. You wait till later, you miss out on some of the compound interest that could accrue for you. Well, I think a football team works the same way. That success begats more success. And oftentimes an even larger measure later on than those who are helping create that on the front end. Well, Kamari Lassiter undoubtedly was one of the players that helped build the foundation for success that Georgia still enjoys right now. Guys like Demello Jones can say, yeah, I want to be like Kamari Lassiter. And Kamari Lassiter has encouraged me to be the very best football player I can be. And there are a lot of guys we would think like that who embodied what good, tough, physical, smart football looks like. And the next generation of Georgia players say, yeah, you better believe I want to be just like that. In fact, this week, Kirby Smart on the SEC Coaches Teleconference was asked, how often does that happen where guys like Kamari influence like Demello Jones or other players who've been successful in the same manner that Lassiter has? How much of this encouragement, instruction, how much of these relationships do get formed? Kirby Smart was asked about that this week.
I know that there's a brotherhood there, and Kamari's a guy that came back a lot. He was around the spring that he was going in the draft. He came to every practice. If I'm not mistaken, I think Mello had maybe just gotten here, but he's a great kid. DeMello's a great kid, and he appreciates the guys who played here before him. All our kids do, but to say how often it happens, I don't know. Those guys, when they come back to games, they get to know the younger players, and with social media the way it is nowadays, everybody knows everybody.
There's a neat aspect to what Kirby Smart is saying there that could almost go unnoticed. In other words, Lassiter helping Demello Jones to the extent that's happened, or other players doing this, this isn't set up by the Georgia coaches. If it was, Kirby would know exactly how often it would take place. He'd say, oh, yeah, we set up phone calls for so-and-so to talk to so-and-so, and we do this, we do that. Kirby Smart's not aware of how frequently it happens because this is happening without the influence of him or the other Georgia assistant coaches. This is just Kamari doing it because he wants to, or Demello reaching out to Kamari because he'd just like to have a conversation with him. These are guys getting to know each other and having a player-led discussion, to former player-led discussion, that coaches don't have to facilitate. That's a pretty special thing about the Georgia program overall, I would say. And to bring this back to where we started earlier, Peter Burns says, oh, Kirby's not going anywhere. Georgia's just sailing through the season. There's chaos everywhere, but Georgia's not a participant in that. And some of the stuff you're hearing Demello Jones say and others say about Demello is one of the reasons why. That Kirby's just been here long enough that the program is humming at a level that most programs can't ever get to because they don't have the ability to maintain continuity with coaches. Either the coach they hired is not good enough, therefore they've got to fire him, or the coach they do have, they don't have enough to offer him, and therefore he's looking to leave. Well, neither one of those things is true at Georgia. Georgia's got all the resources that Kirby would want. Kirby's the kind of leader that Georgia would want to hold on to forever. And so therefore, to use a phrase I used a moment ago, the compound interest of year over year, time over time, it just continues to accrue. And now as a Georgia fan, you do get to think about, well, what if Demello Jones really is the next Kamari Lassiter, or another player at a different position is the next version of previous great player who's still in the NFL who also did great things for Georgia? That's one of those things that's a little bit easy to imagine, but it's not just a figment of your imagination. It's the kind of thing that very much can come true, because there are aspects of the Georgia program culture that do seem to replicate themselves year over year through the decade, even if the names themselves start to change. And the way in which Georgia goes about its business right now, the confidence and comfort Kirby Smart seems to have with these players really does feel like the things that he loved about what the previous era embodied too. In fact, let me give you an example of this. So Demello Jones says, I want to be like Kamari Lassiter. And Demello Jones says, yeah, Kamari Lassiter's helped me be, at least a little bit, encouragement, the kind of player I want to be. And Kirby's own compliments of Demello would lead us to believe that that really is working out. Well, what exactly would that mean if Demello Jones, or even like an Ellis Robinson and other guys, it's not just Demello, what would it mean exactly if Demello Jones were to be the next in line like what a Kamari Lassiter once was? Let's go back in time on this for a moment. When Kamari Lassiter was finishing his Georgia career, when Kamari Lassiter knew the kind of draft pick he would want it was going to be. And yet he still chose to play in what some might would have viewed for Georgia as a meaningless bowl game against Florida State, a game that Georgia won 63-3. There was really no drama about whether or not Georgia would win. They set a bowl record for margin of victory. And yet Kamari Lassiter still wanted to be there with his teammates, still wanted to play. And at the time in Miami, Kirby Smart talked about exactly what that said about Kamari Lassiter, and the words that Smart used about Lassiter, I think, reinforce one of the things that makes Georgia, benefiting guys like Demello Jones today. Let's go back in time and hear Kirby Smart on that.
Kamari Lassiter had a 1-2 grade, first, second round grade, and Kamari had to make a tough decision like all these other people. And I called Kamari in and I talked to him and I told him, Kamari, you should come out for the draft. That's my opinion. You're one of the top corners in the draft. You got to make that decision. Okay, that's one decision. Then the second decision is you got to decide if you want to play in this bowl game. I don't know that you got a lot to gain in this bowl game, Kamari, but I do know who you are. And I do know how you practice, and I do know how you lead. But I'm not going to be disappointed in anything you decide. He came back about 3 or 4 days later, and I met with him and his mom and talked to him and fully expected him not to play in this game. He called me 2 days later, said, Coach, I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm sitting out. I'm over there coaching. I can't do it. I want to be out there. I want to play with my guys. And I think he did it against his mother's will, to be honest. Now, I don't know that, but I think he did it against his mother's will because that's who he is. So all these teams that go shopping, this dude right here wants to play football. That's all he cares about is playing football and his teammates. He ain't worried about the next thing and all that and all that. He said, I want to play football, and he played football for the University of Georgia. And he did it when he didn't have to do it. And that's what's different at this place than a lot of other places. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Coach Smart.
There you go. Got a little thank you to Kirby at the end there. So let me sum all this up this way. And you already know the point I'm about to make because it's self-evident. Someone like Demello Jones saying, oh, yeah, I want to be like Kamari Lassiter. That is a very good player to emulate. Kirby Smart's words indicate how true that is. And given the stuff we've seen from a guy like Demello Jones, it certainly seems like it's quite possible that he and a lot of other young players in this Georgia defense right now are well on their way to being the next version of what these former great players once were. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. We are glad you're with us. However you get to us, live on video, on demand after that, such as the DawgNation YouTube page. By the way, for those of you who subscribe to us, you give us a like, you help us further our mission there on YouTube. We really appreciate that. If you listen to the radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, we're thankful for that. Glad to have you with us as a part of the program today. Or if you're a podcast, the platform we began on, Apple, Spotify, for our audio folks, we appreciate you being a part of that too. And we're so thankful to our friends at Merriweather and Tharp for being your source for Georgia divorce and making our show possible today. Now listen, we don't love divorce. In fact, we don't like it at all. But we do recognize it is a reality for people in our audience, for an audience the size of ours. Statistically speaking, of course, a good number of you have either dealt with this or you fear that you might be forced to deal with this in the future. And I wish I could change those circumstances for you, but since I can, I'm going to do the next best thing. I'm going to give you a recommendation for some really kind and generous people who want to walk with you through this challenging time. They want to set you up for success in the next season of life. And that's true no matter where you happen to be in the state of Georgia right now. Obviously, in the Atlanta area, Merriweather and Tharp has been famous for how they've served people in one of the most scary and confusing times they may ever encounter. But now this is also true statewide, in Columbus, in Savannah, in Athens, in Peachtree City, all across the great state of Georgia. The folks at Merriweather and Tharp want to help you. They just want to listen to you. And sometimes it's just nice to have somebody listen to your story and hear the complicated things that you're considering and give you just some good advice. And when you hear what they have to say after that free initial consultation, I think you'll make the right decision. You'll hire Merriweather and Tharp to help you through your divorce proceeding, and you'll put yourself on a journey that'll, I think, eventually lead you to a happy place. And that's what Merriweather and Tharp wants to help you do. So please find them online. It's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. That is GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Merriweather and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. We're glad to have you here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We've got Terrence Edwards here coming up. Terrence had a great weekend this past weekend. We'll celebrate some good news for him here in just a bit. That's all on the way. But prior to that, I want to go around the doghouse, and it's presented today by our friends at Daytona Beach. And I want to do a little quarterback talk here for a moment, including hitting a big story around UGA that we really have not talked enough about as of yet. So we'll get to that here coming up in just a moment. But let me start with this. I mentioned a moment ago Kirby Smart, SEC coaches teleconference. Kirby talked a little Gunner Stockton on there, and I thought it was pretty interesting. So we have seen Gunner Stockton go from, even, by the way, after a very successful run through the postseason last year, where, I mean, he came in and saved Georgia in the SEC championship. If you were watching that game last December, it certainly seemed like through the first half that Georgia was not likely to win that game. And yet the feeling around Georgia, and this is not to disrespect anybody who's no longer at UGA, but this was recognizable. The feeling around Georgia changed when Gunner Stockton entered the game. He led Georgia to that win. To Carson Beck's credit, he also came back in after injury for the game's final handoff, and that should never be forgotten. It really shouldn't. But Gunner Stockton helped lead Georgia to that win. He went on to play, I think, pretty admirably in his first start in the Sugar Bowl. Georgia didn't win, but Gunner Stockton played well enough to give Georgia a chance to win. And yet, even with that, there were still some questions about, are we sure that Gunner can handle a full season? Are we sure Gunner can help get Georgia to where it wants to go and needs to go this year? And after early games against Marshall and Austin Peay, not all those questions were answered. Frankly, at times, Gunner maybe seemed a little timid. Maybe it seemed like Gunner wasn't fully comfortable yet. There were phrases like, just cut it loose, let it rip. Seems like we heard a lot of that about Gunner at the time. Well, now, all these games later, Gunner's letting it rip and cutting it loose all the time, with his arm, with his legs, everything in between. So Kirby Smart was asked this week, okay, we know what Gunner is now. There was skepticism about what maybe he was at the beginning of the season, and those early season games didn't necessarily change that. So at what point did all of this change for Gunner here this year? When did he first show signs of being the quarterback that he is now? And Kirby Smart was willing to answer that question this week, and he gave a pretty interesting one. Here's Kirby going back to Gunner's first SEC and his first road start at Tennessee. Interesting stuff from Kirby.
It's harder to have a defining moment for that. I do think the game at Tennessee, just the game in general, not a defined play, was the opening drive of Tennessee, the execution level, the communication, that helped him tremendously. But he's had bumps in the road even since that, and it's not a thing where you get over it and then it's like over and done with, and you're just like all of a sudden in this free space. You're always growing as a player and a coach, and he is still growing as a player and a coach. But I think his confidence grew from the ability to play there and play on the road.
So I think that's a very honest, very solid assessment from Kirby Smart that the Tennessee game seemed to change a lot for Gunner Stockton, and it seemed to change a lot for Georgia overall. And when you look at where Georgia is right now, we started the show by being thankful for Georgia's playoff positioning and the absence of drama with so much chaos around the SEC. It is very important to remember that back in September, all of what's happening now did not seem to be foretold. It did not seem to be a guarantee that Georgia would be in this spot. If anything, Georgia seemed to be in a pretty precarious position. But because Gunner had played so well against Tennessee, and after Tennessee had marched down the field and scored on its first drive, and Georgia was able to respond and do the same thing, even though it built the deficit after that, there was this belief that Georgia could get it done against Tennessee. In that game, you talk about game control, there was almost zero game control for Georgia on that particular Saturday, but they did what they needed to do to win. And in subsequent weeks, when, as Kirby said, Gunner wasn't always perfect, he really wasn't. There was belief that he could be what Georgia needed for him to be because he had handled business in his first SEC start on the road. I do think that matters. I think that's a pretty cool comment from Kirby Smart. He didn't necessarily have to be quite as candid as he was there, but I do think he correctly points back to, if you want to call it the legend of Gunner Stockton, at least for this season, that particular game against the Vols may be part of the origin story for how we've gotten to where Gunner is right now. Now, real quick before I bring on Terrence Edwards, let me do one more thing related to quarterback, and I'm a little bit ashamed that here we are Thursday. We haven't really had time to get into yet what was huge news for Georgia going back over the weekend. On Sunday, Georgia got a massive commitment. That's class of 2028, so it's 2 cycles ahead, but it's still a 5-star quarterback, number 1 player in the country for that particular cycle. Jaden Wade has committed to UGA. IMG Academy is where he attends. Big-time quarterback prospect, and coming on the heels of a huge win for Georgia against Texas, all of this just feels like a ton of program momentum right now. We're going to talk to Jeff Sintel more about this tomorrow and whatever else may be going on with Georgia at the quarterback position right now, including those weird rumors that are out there related to Jared Curtis. We'll cover a lot of that with Jeff tomorrow. But for now, I just want to take time to pause and just appreciate what Georgia seems to be getting in Jaden Wade. In fact, speaking of Jeff Sintel, he and Kaylee Mansell on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger on Wednesday, talked about this big addition. That's 2 cycles ahead, so it's not top of mind for a lot of Georgia fans right now in the midst of the season that Georgia's currently in. But eventually it's going to really matter. And so let's, without further ado, give you a little bit of a breakdown of Georgia getting top quarterback from the class of 2028 committing on Sunday, Jaden Wade. Here's Kaylee and Jeff talking about that.
It's the number 1 player in the class of 2028, quarterback Jaden Wade. And I think I've maybe been a little bit confused by the public's reaction to the Jaden Wade commitment. Yes, he is a 2028, and yes, it's so far away. But this is not just the number 1 quarterback in the class of 2028, Jeff. It's the number 1 overall player who, by the way, might reclassify to 2027. So, I mean, I guess before we have that conversation about Jaden Wade, I think it's important for people to understand why they should still care about someone who is so far away from entering the program.
Kelly, one of those things it is a amplification or an endorsement of the Georgia brand. Here's what I mean by that. Number 1, he said he likes the Georgia's identity, the team identity around it. He likes the way the Dogs just keep the main thing, and that's winning football games, which is basically Kirby Smart's staple. He's also connected. That's one of Georgia's character traits, right? Nate Frazier grew up in the same area. Zeg Fort, 2026 safety commit. Been around each other more than half their lives. Ellis Robinson's in his ear. And we've got a great story about Jaden Wade on DawgNation.com about this secret he made before the year. He told people when he committed, he said, we had figured this out. Kirby Smart and I, the Georgia staff, made a secret commitment prior to the season that he was going to commit later this year. And that's what he did. He held straight to it. His future Georgia teammates on the IMG Academy team, he told them about it, and he said, keep it on the low. And they did. So these guys kept the 5-star secret the entire season that Jaden Wade had already committed to Georgia prior to his sophomore season. So you want to talk about something sticking? Well, it's already stuck for 6 or 7 months.
Yeah, so really good stuff from Kaylee Mansell, Jeff Sintel on that. I think Jeff says it so well, that the commitment of Wade just furthers the Georgia brand. So you got a situation where, as we just pointed out, Gunner Stockton's playing at a Heisman level right now. The future of the Georgia quarterback position seems strong, too, with Wade on his way for the class of 2028, if not perhaps an earlier reclassification. But certainly in some future time, Jaden Wade seems set to arrive at UGA and keep the quarterback position strong at Georgia for perhaps a long time to come. And that is Around the Doghouse, presented today by our friends at Daytona Beach. Now, I'll tell you right now, I love Daytona Beach. I love beach vacations. And for me, this time of year, there may be no better place for you to go than Daytona Beach. Enjoy the 23 miles of shoreline, convenient to get to. There's an international airport that flies right there. You got great shopping and dining and golf and fishing, and you want to surf, all kinds of great outdoor activities. You get all of that with Daytona Beach. And because there's so many hotel and resort options, even during what's a kind of a popular time to sneak away and be at Florida as you head towards the holidays and into the early winter portion of 2026. For those of you who like to use wintering as a verb, you want to winter at Daytona Beach? Well, you can get better hotel savings than you perhaps realize if you'll check out DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals. That is DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals today. We love having Daytona Beach as a part of Around the Doghouse. We also love having Terrence Edwards a part of the show here, too. Terrence has got some big news going back to the last weekend. I want to celebrate with him, so we'll do that and talk about everything as it relates to Georgia here right now today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We will say hello to the great former Georgia wide receiver, Terrence Edwards, and the head coach of Mount Vernon Christian here in the Atlanta area. And Terrence, first of all, congratulations are in order to you. Last week, big first-round win against Savannah Country Day, setting up, I believe it's Fellowship Christian for y'all coming up on Friday night. So moving on to the second round in the private school bracket, congratulations on a big playoff win. How did it feel to help bring that one home last week?
It felt great, just for myself being a brand new and young head coach. That's my first playoff victory. So that's a little special to me. And being able to get my first victory against a team that put us out last year in the playoffs. So that was a big revenge game for us. And we earned the opportunity to go play the number one seed, Fellowship Christian. They're in our region, so we've already played them this season. They beat us pretty handily because they're a really good football team. So we earned the right to go in and give them the rematch, and our players are excited about this opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think when you start, whether it be winter workouts or you move into spring practice or in those long, arduous showing up early in the summer and you're doing the conditioning, you're doing all that, the season at times can feel like a long way away. But when you do advance in the postseason, you realize a lot of folks, certainly in a sad fashion for many, their seasons come to an end. There are fewer teams playing now in Georgia than there were even a week ago, and certainly a lot fewer than were 2 weeks ago. To know that you're one of the ones that still get a chance to play deeper into November, I know that's going to be a great feeling for your players too.
It is, and I think it's a great opportunity for the program as well, that we get an opportunity to continue to play football, and I think all my players has earned the right to continue playing football. Now we have another opportunity to go out and showcase our talent against a very talented Fellowship team. So I'm excited about this opportunity. Our players are excited about this opportunity. And come Friday, we'll see where we're at as a program.
So before you joined us, I was talking a little about Demello Jones, the Georgia cornerback, who says that the player that he maybe most emulates is Kamari Lassiter, and they've had a little bit of a relationship with each other. When you were a player coming up, I'm assuming obviously you took a lot of advice and leadership from your brother Robert, different position, but still a guy who played the game the right way, and no doubt you wanted to keep that tradition alive at Georgia. Were there other players though that you said, "Hey, I'd like to be like so and so," or "I'd like to be, I'd like to embody what so and so is all about"? Now I know Tommy Frazier at the quarterback position. You've told us that before, but other players that maybe you look to embody while you're at Georgia?
A while that Georgia was Hines. We kind of took the same route to Georgia as former quarterbacks. And then I knew that Coach Dunn was kind of recruiting me to kind of take that position over, that multifaceted athlete that can play quarterback, running back, receiver, just get the ball in his hands in multiple ways. So I knew going into Georgia, that's the position that I was going to play. So kind of looked up to Hines, knowing him personally for many years before I got there. So that's the kind of the person that I kind of emulated. I didn't block like him, but that's the kind of game that I want to showcase as well.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, and obviously Hines Ward was famous for his physicality, both at the college and the NFL level. Now we think of you as, obviously you coach wide receivers and you're so into precise route running and things like that. When you were first coming up, like you said, you'd play quarterback in high school. As you moved towards college, the receiver position was a little bit new for you. It's interesting that you set the records that you set, kind of becoming the consummate receiver in the process. even though a little bit like Hines Ward, that's not really what you were by trade coming out of high school. It must have been an interesting process for you to become this well-trained, polished receiver when that's not really what you grew up being.
Yes, didn't grow up being a receiver. Grew up playing, basketball as a point guard and playing quarterback throughout my high school career. And I didn't play receiver until I got to Georgia. I played a little bit in the All-Star game, the Georgia-Florida All-Star game, and caught a touchdown in that game. But I didn't really learn how to play receiver until Coach Rick got to Georgia. I played a lot just off natural ability, natural IQ, and understanding of the game. Um, I could catch, still didn't know the proper ways to catch and didn't know the proper ways to really run routes. So just off of natural ability. So I wish I could go back and start my years from the Coach Rick years when I really understood how to play the position. And I just could see myself being so much better. And that's hard to say that I could be better as a freshman and sophomore. But my senior year is definitely when, I just really took off because of the tutelage from Coach John Eason, my receiver coach at Georgia, that time. And he really taught me how to play the position.
So going back to last Saturday, how I mean, it's an easy question, obviously, but how impressive was this Georgia performance? I mean, Texas to me is a good team, and I know they've taken some criticism here this week, and maybe with good reason. Obviously, preseason number one now lost 3 times. That's not what they wanted to do, but I don't think that changes the nature of what Georgia was able to get done against them. How impressed were you by what you saw from Georgia this past Saturday?
I was very impressed the way that we ended the game. I know we, scored 14 points. Then we had about 4 or 5 possessions there that where we punted. And I think some people just got to give credit to Texas at that point in time. Like they're a Division One team as well. They have really good players as well, really good coaches. So they made the adjustment. Then Coach Bobo made more adjustments on the offensive side. And you got to just give the whole coaching staff credit the way the guys played. And I think one of the biggest things is we found a pass rush with Zayden Walker, I think that's his name is,
Yeah.
the freshman. He came in with a little different juice, and they have found something with that young man. And so just give everyone's credit how we performed. And I'm looking for, we have Charlotte this week and have Georgia Tech. So I'm just really excited to see them play against because that was a special performance in my opinion.
I mean, the Zayden Walker emergence is really important because, I mean, listen, nobody, obviously wants C.J. Allen not to play, but it looks like whether you wanted to or not, for a couple of weeks, C.J. Allen's probably not going to be playing. And, that's a huge loss for Georgia for a million different reasons. But at least one small silver lining is that it does create a little more time for a young guy like this, who, and I love the way you say it, Zayden Walker is bringing a little extra juice to Georgia right now. And, you'd love to have him plus C.J. Allen, but it at least, I mean, at least you have a guy like this who can provide something for you. I really like what Georgia got from Zayden, and look forward to seeing more of that. The C.J. Allen loss is just monumental, but it is nice to know that Georgia does still have some depth, even beyond guys like Justin Williams and Chris Cole. A guy like Zayden Walker, that's a guy that you look forward to seeing more from.
Yes, unfortunately that we did lose our leader on defense, C.J. Allen, and if we had to get hurt, I think this is the best time being able to. We play University of Charlotte this week, but I really like the young inside linebackers in Chris Cole and Justin Williams. They're 5-star for a reason. So yes, we would lose some leadership, we'll lose some experience, but this is a good opportunity for those 2 guys to go in and show the world that once C.J. Allen leaves, and I presume that he will, leave this year for the NFL draft, that we have another stable of linebackers waiting in the wings to take over that position. So I'm excited to see those young guys get like the bulk of the first team reps, and just see what they do just from a leadership standpoint. Like are there leaders at that position? I think they are. So I'm excited to see those young guys go out and perform and take over that leadership position.
Let me ask a couple things before we say bye to you here today. Thing number one is this. So put yourself back in the position of being a player again, if you don't mind. It's a long season, and you've finished your SEC run. You've got a big rivalry game coming up against Georgia Tech. But in between, as you say, it's Charlotte on Saturday. What's the mindset this week of how do you stay focused to do what needs to be done while also trying to stay healthy and maybe trying to rest up? Maybe thinking a little bit about, what next Friday is going to involve for you. There are potentially a lot of things in the mind of Georgia players right now. How do you do what needs to be done in what is clearly going to be a very different atmosphere on Saturday than it was this time a week ago?
I just think you got the best coach in college football, and he's going to continue to have those guys locked in and focused. And just as a player who played in these type games, you want to be locked in because you're trying to get your numbers. I think that's something some of the players going to go into this just trying to get their stats, and this could be a stat game, as you say. But Kirby does a great job of keeping these guys so focused and locked in on the task. I just think if we go out and perform to our ability, that some of the second and third team guys could get opportunity to go in and play. They deserve this opportunity. They've done the same weightlifting. They've done the same conditioning, and I think it's important for our starters to go out there and just continue to get better at some of the things that they want to improve on. Also, I think it's important to get some of the 2s and 3s some game experience, because as you saw last year, you're one play away from your starting quarterback, who was Carson Beck, getting hurt. Now your backup is in, so these reps matters, and these are not practice reps, these are game reps.
Well, Terrence, we'll leave it right there for today. Thanks so much for being here. I know you've got a lot to do to get ready for your game against Fellowship tomorrow, so the fact that you'd spend some time with us, really appreciate that. Just great to have you, and best of luck tomorrow, and already congratulations on a playoff win. And of course, at some point in time later on this winter, that bubble work is going to begin again next year's season. Never too far away to be thinking about. Guys want to get better at catching the football. You help them do that. How can they connect with you at the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy?
Yeah, spots are limited. So we start up the first Monday in February. So if you're looking for that off-season training, quarterback or receiver, you can follow me at Terrence Edwards on all Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy on all social media platforms.
Terrence, appreciate it. Best of luck tomorrow. We'll talk to you very soon.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
As I am saying that we'll talk to Terrence soon, I guess it does occur to me that a week from today is Thanksgiving, so there'll be no show on Thursday. A week from tomorrow is game day, and I reckon we'll just be on air the entire time. I think we are going to do DawgNation Daily that morning, rolling into game day coverage. Kaylee will have you with the game day pregame show. That'll be, 1:30 for next Friday? And then I'll have you a DawgNation postgame call-in show after the game. So we'll have at least 3 shows next Friday, getting ready for clean old-fashioned hate at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Looking forward to that. That's on the way. Before we do our SEC through, let me also give a shout out to our friends at Cercheros. And boy, I tell you what, I've had so many people come up to me lately and say, "PA, I just love this Cercheros. Glad to have you all talking about it." People that did not know about Cercheros, they heard us talk about it here on DawgNation, and now they're loving it. We had it last week as a part of our DawgNation on Tap event. People got to get a chance to taste it there. But also people are enjoying just locations, whether it be you got one in Athens, you got one in Gainesville, that's my hometown, all around, Alpharetta, of course, all around you've got the great fresh mix of Cercheros, and people are trying it and they're loving it, and they're finding out that in this category of restaurant, there's no fresher, no friendlier, folks putting this together than what Cercheros brings to the table when it comes to this delicious fresh mix food. Burritos, bowls, quesadillas, tacos, so much more. And it's a great option for you on game day, too. So if you're thinking about catering a watch party at your house, or if you've got a big tailgate going on, well, of course, the delicious fresh mix of Cercheros is a great option for that. In fact, if you want to think about next weekend for Georgia Tech, day after Thanksgiving, everybody's had like the Thanksgiving leftovers and things like that by that point. They want something maybe a little bit more, you need going in a different direction. We think that Sorcheros is a great game day option for you next week when people have had all their fill of turkey and dressing and stuff like that. They want a little spice. They want a little flavor. Well, we think the delicious fresh mix of Sorcheros would be a great option for that. So you got a group of 10 or more getting together, Sorcheros be ready to go for you on that. All right, let's talk about this weekend's games for a moment. And if you saw our edition of Go With The Flow yesterday, presented by R.S. Andrews, I joked with Mike Griffith on there about how this is the weekend where it seems like everybody's just biding their time, getting ready for rivalry week, getting ready for conference championship week, just one more sleepy weekend to get through, and then you'll be ready for whatever's coming next. But college football has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. So be on guard for upsets this weekend, or at least the potential of some drama. Let's talk for a little bit about where that might come from. Obviously, one of the things you'll have your eye on is Oklahoma and Missouri. It is interesting to me to know, the Missouri quarterback, Bo Pribula, has been out for a while. And I know I mispronounce his name every single time. I also mispronounce it differently every single time. I think my hope is if I keep mispronouncing it, eventually I might accidentally land on the correct pronunciation. So far, that's not really working out, but that's my hope that eventually I might get there. But the point is, after missing some time, Eli Drinkwitz talked earlier this week that maybe Pribula might be able to play. On the first availability report for the week, though, Pribula was listed as doubtful. So I don't know what that means for him, but I would assume that he's not fully. I've always felt like if he was going to play again this season, it's probably the Arkansas game more so than the Oklahoma game. That's my best guess, maybe a slightly educated guess, but it's my best guess. Nonetheless, though, this is a Missouri team that does have some chance of keeping it close against Oklahoma. I would be surprised if Oklahoma won the game. I'm sorry, if Missouri won the game. But, Oklahoma has had its issues in SEC games at home. There was the close one against Auburn earlier this year, which was probably an Oklahoma win in part because of an officiating decision on the Oklahoma touchdown when it looked like they were trying to play some games with a fake substitution. And it was later ruled by the SEC to have been decided in error. Oklahoma's also lost 3 games outright to SEC teams in Norman since it's joined the SEC. I think there's some reason to believe this one could be a little closer. And fresh off a win against Alabama, with Oklahoma not just currently in the playoff field, but with the chance of hosting a game in the college football playoff, there may be some drama with Missouri on Saturday. I would be watching out for that. And then beyond that, as we open the show with, we'll find out if there's later drama for Eli Drinkwitz, because I'm telling you right now, Missouri's a pretty good team this year. They're not a playoff contender, but they are a top 25 level team as far as I'm concerned. And I think that Eli Drinkwitz, going back to 2020 when he was first hired, has done a really good job in Columbia. It seems like there's a lot less attention around where Drinkwitz might go compared to Lane Kiffin. Kiffin's just a bigger personality. But Eli Drinkwitz has been a good coach. And I do think that Drinkwitz could be in line for, and probably should be in line for, a better job at some point in the SEC. So depending on whatever happens with this game for Oklahoma and then the game against Arkansas to close out the season for Missouri, what happens next for Eli Drinkwitz could be interesting, but there also could be some drama with Missouri going to Oklahoma on Saturday. There could also be big drama with Tennessee going to Florida. Y'all know the story here. Tennessee never seems to play well against Florida. Vols are ranked in the college football playoff top 25. They're 20th. Florida's got an interim coach. They were recently blown out by Kentucky, but they're only like a 3.5-point underdog hosting Tennessee on Saturday. As I briefly mentioned when the show began, what if Tennessee loses? Now, much to the chagrin of Georgia fans who wish I wouldn't say this, I think that Josh Heupel, for the most part, has done a pretty good job at Tennessee. I really do. I think he's done a pretty good job. But man, oh man, after being in the playoff a year ago, if Tennessee were to lose this one and drop to 8-4, with a rivalry game, or at least 7-4, with a rivalry game against Vanderbilt still left to play, that would be a pretty tough offseason for Josh Heupel. It would be. Tennessee plays with some pressure on Saturday. And what's interesting is this one probably means more to Tennessee coaches than it does to Tennessee players. The Tennessee players, you might think, they've already, run Boo Carter off. You might think there's, or Boo Carter left on his own, however you want to describe that. you might think there's some Tennessee players who are thinking about whatever's next for them, whether it's more playing time next year at Tennessee because so-and-so is leaving, or a different Tennessee player who's thinking, where's my next destination going to be because I'm looking to get out of here. They're not taking care of me for my NIL or whatever it is. Players have a lot on their mind these days. You can make a case this game means a lot more to the Tennessee coaches because they need it than the Tennessee players who are perhaps just thinking about when's this season going to come to an end. We already know we're not making the college football playoff. Circle Gainesville, Florida on Saturday night. This one is very big for Tennessee, and it could be a quality of life type game for Josh Heupel. Got to find some way to win somehow, some way, something they have not done in Gainesville in darn near, couple of decades. I think it's been 2 decades since they've won in Gainesville. Big one for Tennessee on Saturday. Upset could really change the landscape in Knoxville. And for now, we'll come back and talk more about some more games tomorrow. But for now, we'll call that your SEC through. And as we wrap up today, we'll give you a golden shoe. Our guy Georgia on tap celebrating the beautiful touchdown throw that Gunner Stockton had to Noah Thomas. And yeah, we're seeing a lot of that from Gunner right now. If he was accused earlier in the season of not letting it rip or not cutting it loose, seemingly no problem with that right now, and so much so that now we're seeing Heisman voters start to take notice too. We pushed that earlier this week. You're seeing a lot more of that now. This would seem to be a campaign that's starting to take some shape, and so we think that's good news. We're excited about that, and we'll give real Georgia on tap a golden shoe for that here today. Speaking of the lousy, stinking Gators, they're trying to beat Tennessee. They better hope they can do that because they sure can't beat Georgia these days. How about 1,839 days? That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is our Gator Hater Updater. We hope all of you have a great day. We'll come back and see you tomorrow at DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised. The price is promised. You can trust them on all of that. All right, we're going to get some comments. I can't go long today, though. I got to record some. We had a lot going on, so I do apologize for that. But I'll try to take a few here over the course of a couple of minutes with you. Porter likes to talk about those lousy, stinking Gators. I like that. Jay Shipe said he got a comment deleted by YouTube. That's maybe the least surprising thing I've ever heard. D. Nelly says that Gunner's performing better in big moments and big games than any other quarterback in the country. He says you can't even name one Heisman moment from Julian Say, and I'd agree with that. I really would. It's one of the reasons why we think, we've had, commenters mention this in our chat. It's one of the reasons why we think that Gunner ought to get serious contention. We really believe he should. Paul Moon says when he lived in North Carolina, he used to drive by the Charlotte campus. Never would have imagined Georgia would be playing them. And yeah, here we are. Here we are. Hard to believe. RT says, any thoughts on the over-the-top press conference for Virginia Tech yesterday welcoming in James Franklin? I guess I didn't see a ton of it. I mean, listen, we certainly know what it feels like, if you want to go back many years ago, to have a program, and I'm thinking about even pre-Mark Richter, to have a program that you thought, and you can pick whatever year you want to from Georgia's past, that, man, we ought to be doing more than we're doing. I mean, that's just a feeling that a lot of college football fan bases have. So I get your sarcasm around, my gosh, they act like James Franklin is going to be the program savior, and we saw enough from Penn State to make us skeptical about whether or not that's true. But this is a program that is hungry to win and does have some fan support and some reason to believe that they think they could win. And so I don't fault them looking for any reason for optimism they get. I understand how silly it seems when they're touting this as like he's, hiring the modern day version of Nick Saban. I do get that. But I also understand why they want a reason to believe. I really do. Let's see what else. DMAR42 says it's a slam dunk for Virginia Tech and a slap in the face to like Auburn and Arkansas. Yeah, I don't know about that. Arkansas maybe, but this is going to be somewhat controversial to some, but I believe it to be true. I think the Auburn job is better than Penn State. I do. I think you have a better chance of winning a national championship if for no other reason than Auburn has played for one and won one far more recently than the last success of that magnitude for Penn State. I don't hesitate in my belief that Auburn is a better job than Penn State. So if you're Auburn, why would you want Penn State's cast off? Arkansas, maybe, but Arkansas may have their sights set on somebody else. In the case of Auburn, though, if you couldn't win the big one at Penn State, then you can't win the big one at Auburn. You can. And so they're probably smart not to do that. All right, let's see what else. Paul Moon says, we think that Clark Lee has any chance of staying in Vanderbilt. I believe that's what Clark Lee wants to do. You've seen the stories lately about Jared Curtis of, would he consider Vanderbilt? And Georgia fans are maybe rightly so, a little concerned about some of what they're reading. I can't tell you that Curtis wouldn't consider Vanderbilt because I don't know. But my suspicion is that the sources for these stories are people that would like to see Vanderbilt step up and support the program, provide more NIL for players like Curtis. Excuse me, I've got the hiccups. Provide more NIL for players like Curtis, and more importantly, to give Clark Lee the contract extension that he thinks, excuse me, I may have to, I don't think I've ever had hiccups on the air, to give him the contract extension that he thinks he deserves. I've made a couple of picks against Vanderbilt recently because if you really thought you were going to win some of these games that you have been playing, you don't use anonymous sources in the media to fish for a contract extension. You win games, you go to the playoff, and you use that as the springboard to get the extension. I believe the current writing on the wall would lead us to believe that Clark Lee doesn't think he's going to go to the college football playoff, and so therefore he's going to try to fish for the extension by other means. And the issue for Vanderbilt's always been, will they fully support their program? And the answer to that has mostly been no throughout the years. If they won't step up and support Clark Lee, then they never will. But maybe they never will is a reasonable answer to the question, because they may actually just not want to do that. That's just maybe not something that they're all that willing to do. But Clark Lee is clearly fishing for that. So Lee is a Vandy grad. I think he'd like to stay. I don't know that he's a huge candidate at any of these other jobs right now, whether fairly or not. But he wants a contract extension, I believe. That's why there's so many stories about Jared Curtis that say, from some unnamed source, if he could just get a contract extension, things would be great. Listen, this is a rule that I follow. There may be unbiased reporters. There are no unbiased sources. When a source talks to the media, whether it be anonymously or otherwise, they have a reason for talking to the media. They have a narrative they want to push. And when you look at what the source says to the reporter, you can usually reverse engineer of why the source chose to talk to the media. It doesn't take Sherlock Holmes or whatever other detective you want to think of to determine, if somebody close to this Jared Curtis recruitment keeps pushing the idea of a long-term contract for Clark Lee, not unimaginable that somebody would like to see Clark Lee get a long-term contract at Vanderbilt. So do with that what you will. Let's see what else. Let me go to DawgNation.com.
Congratulations, by the way, on your prediction of 10 million people watching the Georgia-Texas.
I did get that right. Thank you, Jay. I'm not sure if everybody heard that or just me, but we did get the 10 million people right on that. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. A broken clock is right twice a day, and I'll count that as one of my two. I mean, when you look at, and we've said this before, it's true, and I'm not just meaning this from a pro-SEC way, because we didn't necessarily predict this to be true. But when you look at how the SEC is just dominating the TV ratings, I mean, lapping the field with TV ratings. Any way you want to measure this, most watched teams, most watched games, networks most represented in the most watched games, however you choose to chop this up, the SEC is doubling and tripling up what the Big Ten is doing on all of its various networks. That's a big deal right now. Let's see what else. Scott Harris says that Virginia Tech is a good job, and with Clemson and Florida State down, the ACC is ripe for the taking. Yeah. Virginia Tech is the kind of place that you can win. Virginia Tech does not have as much value to, like, say, conference expansion as its in-state rival Virginia probably has, but it is a place you can win, and they do have some support, and they have a right to want to try to be good, and that's what they're trying to do right now. Ken Holcomb says just about any SEC coaching job is better than a Big Ten coaching job in terms of playing competitive teams and having a chance to be seen on the national stage. That's certainly true. The one thing the Big Ten can offer is gobs and gobs of money. Whether they're getting big TV ratings for it or not, they do have a very lucrative media rights deal. But in terms of the arms race of who's paying more attention to what league, the SEC is winning this by a wide margin right now. DT also points out the other benefit of the SEC is you don't have to travel coast to coast, which is also true. Randy Hall asked me this yesterday. I did answer the question. I'll answer it again. Have I made any? Sometimes I feel like Randy asks questions and then doesn't listen to the answer. But as far as improvements go to our home, no. As I think I mentioned this yesterday, we mostly just have. We're pretty modest people. Pretty simple home. Bedroom for our kids. Bedroom for us. Little room to stretch out. We have a nice porch. I will say I do enjoy my back porch. But other than that, we're pretty modest. We don't have a lot of fancy stuff. No east wing, no west wing, no big things that some of y'all have. Just a pretty modest home all the way around. I do appreciate you asking. It's been a great home for us, but pretty modest all the way around. Let's see what else. By the way, Matt Rukavina says if Tennessee loses again, he'll get to use his home for the holidays joke again. Yeah, Matt would have us laughing at that a good bit years ago. That's always funny. Also, they mentioned that our guy UGA Marine hasn't been in here today. Been away for a bit. SEM Dog points out I need to drink some Dr. Pepper. Indeed, that's the case. Actually, I was thinking about that. I'm looking forward to having one of those right when the show is done. DT says, is Talon Taylor back healthy now? No, my understanding is Taylor's not going to be back until next season. That the ankle he dealt with, and I always have a hard time remembering a lot of these injury things, but the ankle that he dealt with is going to keep him out for a while, not the rest of this season. We won't see him the rest of this season. Let's see what else. We're going to have to bounce out. Randy asked about my kids playing sports. So my son's obviously he's always doing baseball. We went and did a little baseball yesterday. Finished his first year playing football, and he had a good time doing that. He's also really into golf right now. He loves that. So baseball is always going to be his biggest thing. But he did play football this year, and he's enjoying golf. My daughter's big into cheerleading, gotten big into cheerleading. I'm going to be like Bill Belichick at these cheerleading competitions. If you saw that photo this week, she's big into cheerleading. So she's all into that. My son, had a good time playing football this year, still loves his baseball. That's pretty much year round for him. And he's also trying to play golf as much as he can too, which is a good thing for a father and a son to do together. Scott Harris says modest home with a future recording studio. So I do have some space, but it's not like, you can make it sound like it's going to be, I don't know, whatever famous studio. Not going to be anywhere near as big as our current DawgNation World Headquarters studio, but I do have some space that I'm trying to get set up for future home recordings, home broadcasts. But not a full-fledged studio. All right, let me do a couple of on Facebook, then we got to get ready to go after that. On Facebook, just for a moment. I had them pulled up, and now they went away. So let me pull over here and get a couple more. Here we go, on Facebook. Bill Sanders says, me and my palatial estate. He has a whole compound here. Yeah, I've never been that big into stuff like that. Because, sometimes you see these gigantic houses. I'm not saying it's bad to have one. I'm not. But you can only be in one room at a time. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like cars. You can only drive one car at a time. So if you've got a garage full, at a certain point, you wonder what the point of having so many is. And once again, if you want multiple cars, I'm not mad at that either. But if you look at us, we have a family of 4. There are lots of moments in which, and I'm thankful for this, that with our family of 4, we're still all in the same room, living room or, a little bit of space upstairs, where we're all in the same room together. And when you realize how much time people spend in just a couple of rooms, you're like, well, gosh, you really don't need that much space. You really don't. But I'm also not against people having really big homes. But it's just one of those things that you don't necessarily need. I shouldn't say you don't. We've never really felt like we needed just 10 bedrooms, some crazy thing like that. We've never quite felt the need for that. But I'm not against people who do. So how about this from Brandon Upchurch? I did not know this. He says the Gunners got a 94 QBR against ranked teams. The only person ever better than that, according to Brandon here, is Joe Burrow, had a 95. This is in the college ball playoff era. That's an amazing stat, Brandon, and I didn't know it. That's remarkable. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that.
Georgia Tech has just announced the Pitt game is sold out, and it's their first season with back-to-back sellouts in 10 years.
So Tech sells out the Pitt game, back-to-back sellouts for the first time in 10 years. It's a big one for Tech now. That's a big one. That is a big one. And I don't know, you can decide for yourself, what do you want? Because I do think that Tech is good enough to threaten Georgia. I do. So do you want them coming off of because if they lose to Pitt, even if they beat Georgia, they're not making the college ball playoff. They're not. This is their game they have to win to make the Georgia game relevant. So do you want an angry Tech team in the role of spoiler? They played pretty good from that spot the last couple of years. Do you want to see them feeling miserable and down because even in this, more about SEC, they squandered their chance at the college football playoff? I guess you can decide for yourself on that. Darian Daniel says, will we be set up for the Tech game? So we'll do the post-game show that day from on the field. Kaylee will probably do her pregame from inside the stadium too. So that'll probably be the plan on that. Before the game, though, kind of milling about, moving around. Well, I'll be there pretty early because we will do DawgNation Daily from the studio that morning. Doug Rayburn says if the Trojans and Grayson win tomorrow, big game in Carrollton next week. That will be a big one. We're also doing tomorrow in Atlanta News First. We'll do Grayson and Colquitt County. Really looking forward to that. Huge game. By the way, speaking of Colquitt County, Jim Blair in here shouting out his Packers. I love that. So that's all great to see. All right, y'all, we got some stuff going on, so I got to get ready to bounce out right now. We appreciate you being here for our RS Andrews Cool Down. I mentioned Go With The Flow a little earlier. Make sure you check out Go With The Flow, presented by RS Andrews, for all of our big picks on this week's top games, including Georgia against Charlotte. Gigantic point spread there, which, spoiler alert, I do not expect Georgia to cover, and I'd almost be mad if they did. So that is on the DawgNation video channels, including YouTube right now. And I love being in my home. I love feeling comfortable in my home. If you want your home to feel cozy and comfortable as we head towards the winter, get your heating system tuned up to factory fresh specs with our friends at RS Andrews. They can do that for you online, rsandrews.com. They'll show up, they'll take good care of you, they'll get some new life out of your old heating system, and that is a great way to save some money. So make sure you check that out today. Y'all have a great day. We'll have plenty more recruiting talk tomorrow. Jeff Sintel, tell us more about Jaden Wade and what is going on with Jared Curtis, if anything. We'll do that tomorrow as lead into Georgia and Charlotte and Senior Day for the Dogs. All of that on the way. We'll talk to you then. DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. Thanks for being here today. We hope you'll come back and see us tomorrow.